The fighter stepped forward, ready. Everyone expected Bruce Lee to move first, to take control, to react. But he didn't. He just stood there, watching. 1 second passed, then another. By the time the attack came, something had already changed. Nobody in that room understood what they were watching yet. The fighter across from him was experienced. He had trained for this kind of moment. He knew how to read an opponent. He knew how to find the opening. He had done this before, many times, against good people. And he had won those times. Not by luck, not by accident. He had won because he was trained, because he was disciplined, because when the moment came, he was ready. He was ready now. He was watching Bruce Lee's hands, his feet, the angle of his shoulders, waiting for the signal that would tell him when to move. Every fighter gives a signal. That's what training teaches you to look for. The lean before the punch, the breath before the kick, the tiny preparation the body always makes before it commits to something violent. Every fighter has one. Most fighters don't even know they have one. The fighter was looking for Bruce Lee's, but the signal never came. Bruce Lee didn't shift, didn't adjust, didn't blink at the wrong moment, didn't bounce on his heels or roll his shoulders or do any of the things fighters do when they're preparing themselves for contact. He just stood there in a stillness that didn't feel natural. Not the stillness of someone waiting, the stillness of someone already working. He just stood there. Why isn't he moving? The fighter took half a step to the left, testing, just a probe, looking for a reaction, something he could use. A twitch, a lean, a shift of weight that would tell him something about how Bruce Lee was going to respond to pressure on that side. It was a small movement, almost casual, but it had a purpose. Nothing came back. Bruce Lee tracked it. His eyes moved just enough to follow the shift, then settled again, calm, patient, unreadable. The room was quiet in a way that felt wrong, not peaceful, not the quiet of two people resting. This was a different kind of quiet, the kind that builds pressure, the kind that sits in the chest and makes the breath shorter without a clear reason for it. The air felt thick, like something was about to happen, but refused to happen yet. Like the moment before a storm decides to break. The fighter adjusted his weight, his back foot pressed slightly harder into the ground. A small thing, almost nothing, just the body, looking for a more stable base, looking for ground to stand on. What does Bruce Lee see that no one else does? His eyes hadn't moved off the fighter's center. Not the hands, not the feet, not the face, the center. That place just below the chest where the body commits before the limbs even know what they're doing. The hands can deceive, the feet can fake, the face can lie. But the center doesn't know how to be dishonest. The center moves first, always, a fraction of a second before anything else. And if you know how to watch it, you don't need to wait for the punch. You see the decision before the punch exists. Bruce Lee was watching the decision. The fighter moved his lead foot, a small adjustment, sliding it maybe 3 inches forward. His stance tightened slightly. This was not preparation for offense. This was a man making himself smaller, making himself feel more defended. His body was doing something his mind hadn't approved yet. His body was getting ready for something coming in rather than going out. And nothing was coming in. Nothing had moved. Nothing had been thrown. His body was reacting to the silence. That matters. A fighter with settled rhythm doesn't make adjustments like that without cause. Those weren't tactical changes. Those were responses to pressure that had no physical form yet. The pressure was coming from stillness, from silence, from a man standing completely still and refusing to give a single frame of usable information to the person across from him. And that silence was doing damage. 3 seconds of it is nothing. 10 seconds starts to feel odd. 30 seconds of standing across from someone who won't move, won't react, won't give you a single thing to work with. That starts to feel like something is wrong. Not wrong with him, wrong with you. Like you're missing something. Like there's information in the room that everyone else can see and you can't find it. The fighter's jaw tightened. His breathing had changed. You could see it in his chest now if you were watching closely. Shorter inhales. Less controlled. His body was beginning to run on a slightly different fuel than it had been running on when he walked into the room. That fuel was starting to have a little more urgency in it. Why can't I read him? He shifted again. Left foot this time. A wider base. More separation. His mind was doing what minds do when they run out of clean information. It was guessing. It was filling in the blanks with probability instead of certainty. It was constructing a picture of what was likely to come based on training, memory, and past experience instead of what was actually in front of him. And the picture it was constructing was making him nervous. Not terrified, not paralyzed. Just nervous in the specific way that comes when preparation meets something it didn't prepare for. He had trained against fighters who moved, who pressured, who came forward with aggression, or who circled with intention. His training had given him answers for all of those things. He knew what to do when a man rushed him. He knew what to do when a man circled and waited for the opening. He had a library of responses for situations that had physical qualities he could identify. He didn't have a response for this. For a man who just stood there and watched, the fighter's eyes moved. Just once, down to Bruce Lee's feet, then back up. It was fast, almost invisible, but it was there. That single eye movement said something very specific. It said his read on the situation had degraded enough that he was going back to basics. He was checking the feet because the feet are the most honest part of a fighter's body. You can fake with your hands. You can fake with your eyes. But you can't really fake the direction your feet are pointed. That eye movement was doubt, not weakness. Just a man quietly checking his own confidence in what he thought he understood. And finding less there than he expected. Nobody saw this happen. There was no announcement, no visible collapse, no obvious moment of fracture. It just eroded, quietly, slowly. The way certainty always erodes when the information it was built on stops arriving. The fighter's weight shifted forward. His shoulders dropped by maybe a centimeter. His chin moved down. These are not the adjustments a man makes when he's finding his footing. These are the adjustments a man makes when he's made a decision, when he's decided that the waiting is more dangerous than the attacking, when the discomfort of standing still has crossed some internal threshold and his body has told him that moving feels safer than staying. He launched a real attack, not a probe, not a test, a committed, full intention attack. The kind that comes from a man who has been holding back and has finally stopped holding back. The kind that has weight behind it, conviction behind it, and it was already finished. Not because of what Bruce Lee did next. That part mattered. But the outcome wasn't decided there. The outcome was decided in the 30 seconds before the attack left the fighter's body, because Bruce Lee had already read it. Not the specific technique, not the exact angle. He had read the timing, the rhythm, the pattern of hesitation and doubt that had been building since the fighter took that first unnecessary step to the left. He had watched the confidence level change, had seen the breathing shift, had tracked every adjustment that the fighter's body made while trying to find stable ground in the middle of an information vacuum. By the time the attack arrived, Bruce Lee knew more about it than the man throwing it. He moved once, clean, no extra motion, no dramatic pivot, no wasted frame of movement. Just a single precise response that put him exactly where he needed to be and put the fighter exactly where he needed not to be. The kind of movement that doesn't look like much when you describe it, but when you watch it, it has a quality that's hard to name, a quality of inevitability, like watching something fall, not surprising, not impressive, just correct. One answer to a question that had already been solved. No second movement needed, no combination, no follow-up that required extra energy or calculation. The first movement was enough because it had been prepared for long enough. The fighter didn't fall dramatically, didn't go flying. He just ended up out of position, out of range, out of timing, in a place where continuing didn't make sense. The way a chess piece ends up cornered, not from a single dramatic stroke, from a sequence of positioning that had been happening for the last 90 seconds while he was busy watching the wrong things. Here is what most people miss when they try to understand what happened in that room. They look at the attack, they look at the response, they look at the hands and the angles and the technique. Those things are real. Those things took years to develop. Bruce Lee's physical ability was not ordinary. His speed was documented, his strength was tested, his technique was the product of an obsessive and relentless pursuit of understanding that most people couldn't have maintained. But that's not where this fight was decided. This fight was decided before a single limb moved in anger. It was decided in the 30 seconds of silence where one man was collecting information and the other man was slowly running out of it. Every fighter gives information. This is not a flaw, it's a law. The body communicates. It cannot help communicating. Every adjustment has a reason. Every breath change has a cause. Every eye movement is an answer to a question the mind is asking. Every weight transfer is the body preparing for something the brain has already half decided. These signals are small. They are fast. They exist in fractions of seconds. Most people in most situations don't have the attention or the training to read them in real time, but they are there, always, without exception. The weight shifts before the legs push. The eyes settle on the target before the hands reach for it. The breathing changes before the body commits. The rhythm of a fighter's footwork tells you whether he's about to attack or about to defend, even before he knows it himself. The small adjustments, the tiny recalibrations, the micro movements of a person trying to find their footing in an uncertain situation, all of it is data, all of it is readable. And if you can read it, you don't need to react to the punch. You've already responded to the intention. By the time the punch arrives, you're not reacting anymore. You're confirming a calculation that was completed seconds earlier. The punch is just the final step in a sequence you already understood. You move not to respond, but to complete an answer that was already prepared. This is why timing is more powerful than speed. Speed is physical, timing is informational. A fast man can be beaten by a slower man who moves at the right moment. A man who has spent 2 minutes reading the rhythm of an opponent knows where the openings are before they fully appear. He doesn't need to be faster than the punch. He needs to be earlier than the decision that created it. Bruce Lee understood this at a level that went past technique. He didn't just train his body, he trained his perception. He spent time developing his ability to see more of a situation than most people could see, to slow down what was happening in front of him through attention rather than through time, to find the signal inside the noise, to separate what the body was actually doing from what the person wanted him to think the body was doing. He understood that most of what happens in a confrontation happens before the confrontation physically starts. The real fight is the information war. Who is reading more? Who is giving away less? Who can hold the silence long enough to make the other person break it on compromised terms? The silence wasn't patience. It wasn't caution. It wasn't fear, dressed up as stillness. It was collection. Every second that passed without Bruce Lee moving was another second of data about how the fighter handled uncertainty. Every second the fighter stood there waiting for a signal that didn't come was another second of his rhythm degrading, another second of his confidence becoming something built more on assumption than on actual information, another second of his body making small involuntary adjustments that told the story of exactly where his attention was and exactly what kind of attack was building inside him. By the time the fighter decided to move, Bruce Lee had already constructed a complete picture of the situation: distance, timing, likely angle of attack, probable speed, most natural follow-up. He had run the calculation with real data gathered in real time, not from memory, not from assumption, but from watching. The fighter thought that by attacking he was finally taking control of the situation. He was wrong. He had given up control of the situation 30 seconds into the silence when he started making adjustments that weren't tactical, when his body started responding to an internal pressure that had no external cause, when his rhythm changed not because of something Bruce Lee did, but because of something Bruce Lee refused to do. He didn't lose control at the moment of the attack. He lost control far earlier than that. By the time he decided to attack, he was already moving on. Compromised information, compromised timing, compromised rhythm. The attack was the visible symptom of a failure that had been happening quietly for a long time before it showed itself. This is the thing about stillness that most people have backwards. When they see someone standing still in a confrontation, they interpret that stillness as passive, as waiting, as delay, as the absence of doing something. They think the person who moves first is the person who's acting, and the person who stands still is the person who's reacting. But that's wrong. Standing still in a situation that creates pressure to move is one of the most active things a person can do. It requires a complete command of your own nervous system. It requires the ability to sit inside discomfort and not respond to it, to let the pressure of the moment exist without letting it force your hand, to continue collecting information while everything around you is pushing you toward action. That's not passivity, that's discipline operating at its maximum, and it creates a specific kind of advantage. Because the fighter standing across from you doesn't know you're doing this. He sees stillness, he interprets it as information, he builds theories about what it means. He adjusts based on those theories, and each adjustment he makes is real data about the accuracy of those theories. Each time he shifts in response to your stillness, he's showing you something. He's showing you where his attention is, what he's worried about, what his plan is, what he's preparing to do. He's solving the problem out loud, right in front of you, and you're writing down the answers. By the time he acts on those theories, you've already read them. You're not responding to his attack, you're responding to his thinking, and you've had more time to think about his thinking than he has. This is why the fight was already over before it started. Not in a mystical sense, not in a poetic sense, in a precise, mechanical, informational sense. The outcome was determined not by who was faster or stronger or more technically skilled. Those things matter, but the window in which they become relevant never opened on equal terms. One man walked into that window with a full picture of the situation. The other walked in with a picture that had been quietly degrading for 90 seconds. It was a different fight for each of them. For the fighter, it was a physical confrontation that suddenly went wrong. For Bruce Lee, it was the final step of a calculation that had been running since the moment they both stepped into the room. Most people want to learn the move, the specific technique that ended it. They want to train the response, the angle, the timing. They watch it and think that's the part to copy. That's the part to work on. But the part that created the technique was invisible. It happened before the camera frame most people are watching. It happened in the stillness, in the silence, in the 2 minutes of standing completely still and seeing everything. You learn the technique in the training hall. You earn the technique in the silence. He didn't win when he moved. He won when he waited.